ESPN NBA front office insider, Bobby Marks, here on 105.3 The Fan. And a good afternoon, sir. How the heck are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We're doing great. You know, it's Friday. Would be a bit better, I think, if the Mavs were in the playoffs. But hey, that's that's just life in the NBA these days. But what do you think of the Mavs being fined $750,000 for tanking, and how you end up in this situation?
Well, if you keep the 10th pick, or if you move up, I guess you could say it's money well invested, right? I guess that's the way we look at it. I mean, I said it on live TV last Friday when all this was going on. I went on NBA Today, and they asked me, if you were in the front office, what would you be doing? I said I probably would take the same approach. I probably wouldn't be as blatant as they were, as far as so out in, with something what was said and kind of how it went about. But hey, when you're in a desperate situation and you're limited as far as what you have to improve your roster, the 10th pick in the draft or the third pick in the draft becomes a certainly valuable asset. So, and I think they could have gotten fined up to $1 million here. So, I mean, I look at it as you still keep the pick and nobody got suspended. It's an investment,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. That's the reality. I think there was some bite at the end at that, the paragraph at the end, I guess, where it said that, the integrity and losing on purpose. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a slippery slope. I mean, we can go back and look at a lot of teams, how they went about doing their business this year since the trade deadline and the All-Star break here. And it was, there were some teams that shut down in mid-March. I get it from the league's perspective that it was trying to get into play-in, and they were tied with Oklahoma City. They didn't control their destiny. If they controlled their own destiny, then I think it would have been significant. But I understand it from the Mavericks. The optics stink. You guys know that. I mean, the optics stink, but the reality is that a month from now or 2 months from now, and if Dallas is sitting at 10 and they get a good player or they trade for a good player, that's important to the organization.
Yeah, it's $750,000 for a 3% chance at Wembanyama. I think that by itself might be worth it for a lot of these billionaires. But I think it is interesting that so many teams can tank for months and just not say anything about it. And Jason Kidd kind of has an off-the-cuff remark like, it's not my fault. And the Mavs tank for one game, it cost them nearly $1 million.
Yeah, and I think it certainly had the commissioner had put in this plan, and I think it's important to him and where Dallas was, and Jason was just being honest. I mean, that's the reality of it. And you're right. I mean, you look at what's happened in Portland over the last 2 years. I mean, even Utah to an extent. I mean, you traded Conley, Beasley, Vanderbilt at the deadline. You got back a 2027 first, and you fell out of the play-in totally here. And they did have some injuries here, but still, I mean, San Antonio, I mean, we can go down a list of teams that have basically been in Detroit, have been in shutdown mode with injuries. I would say if the games meant something more, if they're fighting for a playoff spot, you'd see probably most of these guys playing.
It's NBA insider Bobby Marks here with you on 105.3 The Fan. Okay, Kyrie Irving said, don't ask me about my situation until the end of the season, and then he bailed at the end of the season on the media scrum, which is fine. But do you assign that any meaning if you're reading into how much a player wants to be here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think only the people within that organization know how much he wants to be there. And I think from what you've heard, certainly from Mark and from Nico and from Jason, is that Kyrie wants to be there. I think now it's a matter of kind of compromising on what that next contract is going to be. It's not going to be 5 for $272. I mean, that's not happening. I think I'd rather let him walk. But is it 4 years? Is it 3 years? You line him up with Luka's deal here. I think, certainly there's, concerns as far as durability standpoint here, but I think it's probably in the best interest of Dallas to try to lock him up. You can't, as I said, you can't lose two guys in a row for nothing. Jalen last year and then Kyrie this year, and I know we all love cap space and stuff, but cap space is fool's gold out there, especially in this free agent class. It's not as good as prior years here. So, no, I wouldn't make into much that, he didn't, I've seen a lot of guys blow off their free agents blow off their media, postseason media and still, sign back with that, that team in the off season.
You mentioned the goal is to keep Kyrie, obviously, but if for some reason he decides he doesn't want to be here, what's the next course of action for the Mavericks? Where would you be looking? Is a sign and trade realistic?
Yeah.
Where can they improve?
Yeah, sign and trade. You can't let him leave just to go. I mean, I think the interesting thing, the market with cap space teams is a lot of these rebuilding teams are retooling. The Indianas, the Houstons, the San Antonio's, Orlando. The Lakers, basically, he'd have to go there for a discount, probably about 15, 16 million per that he could earn in Dallas. So if he said, like, hey, I want to go to Phoenix, for example, like I want to go play with Kevin Durant again, and you're looking at certainly all different sign and trade options here. And the last resort, that you do not want, the doomsday, is for him to basically kind of call your bluff and say, I'm going to go somewhere and sign for $20-25 million. I'm going to be happy. You've got to figure out, the sign and trade is probably your best option if it's not going to be him staying there.
And do you feel like it's what type of market and teams that do you feel like will actually be interested in him?
Well, you eliminate some of the teams because of, the restrictions as far as teams adding, in a sign and trade, the Milwaukee's, the Clippers, the Golden States of the world, those type of teams here. I mean, that's the interesting thing is, like I said, is he a $45-46 million player? Yeah, he is. But who's Dallas bidding against, right? Like, who is Dallas bidding against? And as I said, the teams I mentioned, those 5 or 6 teams that have cap space, certainly the Lakers in there, but I think you've seen with the Lakers, balancing out the roster, not being top heavy with 3 guys earning over, $120 million doesn't work all the time here. So I think that's where you've got to kind of, figure out a middle ground here as far as what his next contract is going to be.
Yeah, so if you're running the Mavericks, you'd rather let him walk and get nothing in return than give him the full 5-year max that he could get?
Oh, that's a big number, man. That's a big. I mean, if I'd be comfortable, I could do 5 if the 5th year is basically contingent on playoff success, games played. If there's kind of like a rolling trigger. My only concern is that, and Luka has said all the right things, and he's only, this is, I think, year 1 of that big contract. Like, I don't want Kyrie on the roster if Luka's not here. Like, that's my big thing moving forward, and that's why I said, you basically probably will want to align, with, whether it be a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal, but 5 for $272 is a challenge. And the other thing too is we're going to get the term sheet with the new CBA rules pretty soon here. That's going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for teams trying to build rosters. Like, you've got to, if you're going to commit to $90 million plus to 2 guys, like, they got to be the right 2 guys moving forward, just because there's going to be some restrictions on how you build your roster.
Talking with Bobby Marks here on 105.3 The Fan. When it comes to Luka, how nervous would you be in the front office about him leaving? I mean, is that something that's already been talked about?
I don't know if you're nervous. I just think anytime, whether it be a guy on his once he signs that second contract, whether it be an extension or a new deal, the clock automatically starts. Like, because it's a good thing because it puts pressure on you to not rest on that. Hey, he's on a contract for 4 years. Guarantees he can't go anywhere. But there's nothing to say that a player can wake up tomorrow and still have 4 years and ask to be traded here. So I don't think it's just Dallas. I think it's any organization here. When you sign, a player that could become an unrestricted free agent, not a restricted free agent, 3 or 4 years from now, there's internal pressure every offseason here. And I think Dallas realizes that the roster has to get better. And they don't. If it's a year from now, I'd be saying, well, wait a minute. The clock has certainly started here. So I don't think it's just in the situation of the Mavericks. I think it's just where we are right now, that although contracts are guaranteed, a player can ask out at any time, and I think teams certainly have their guard up against that.
It's NBA front office insider Bobby Marks here with you on 105.3 The Fan. There's so many interesting ways to kind of take this conversation. What do you think about the idea that with Luka and Kyrie, you're too compromised defensively, and Jason Kidd wants to play defense so bad? Maybe a sign and trade with Kyrie is the ideal end result of this summer for the Mavs.
Yeah, I mean, because then you probably are breaking whatever that $45-46 million, and maybe there's 3 players, right, that you can get back, and maybe that's where it's basically kind of reverting back to what you had, I guess, a year ago, where you're a little more balanced as far as with your roster, and that's the challenge, because it's Kyrie and Luka together, offensively are as talented as they can be. The problem is that what else do you have, right? Like what else do you have on your roster? And you've got your young players in Hardy and Green. You'll probably lose Christian Wood. Dwight Powell's a free agent. You're basically looking at, Bullock, Hardaway Jr., Kleber, McGee, Bertans, that group. So that's the other, as you said, is there a deal out there where you maybe can break up that? Because as I said, you're restricted as far as how else you build, unless, of course, you flip the 10th pick into something of value, similar to what, Portland did last year. But they had a big trade exception, a guy like Jeremy Grant, for example, here, where you're getting value with that draft pick.
Bobby, this might be an unfair question, but I'm curious your assessment of Nico Harrison and his ability as a GM when it comes to the relationships. That was something I think the Maverick fans were sold on with his relationships from Nike, maybe finally being able to land a big fish here in Dallas. And they traded for Kyrie. So the hope is that Kyrie stays because of that built-in relationship with him and Jason Kidd. But from a basketball perspective, his ability to assess players and draft, is he well thought of among league circles?
Yeah, he is. I think the thing you have to be careful, and I liked what they were able to do last year. He broke up Porzingis into Dinwiddie, and Bertans, and you've kind of balanced your cap ledger a little bit here. I think the one thing you have to be careful, and you look at the situation in New York when Leon Rose was hired as a former agent who had all these relationships. I think relationships are important. I think relationships are important when you have players on your roster, as far as everything that kind of comes off the court. At the end of the day, guys want to win. At the end of the day, guys want to go to organizations that have a chance to compete for a championship, no matter what type of relationship you have. And does that give them an edge if you're at the table and you're meeting with Draymond Green, for example, and there's already a relationship and there's a comfort level? Of course, that gives you an advantage here. But I think it is a little bit overblown, I want to say. I mean, shoot, in 2010, we had Jay-Z as one of our owners. We went into LeBron, Bosh, and Wade meeting because he was friends and had a good relationship, and we went 0 for 3. So I think you do have to be a little bit cautious there. I think, as I said, if you have a good roster and you have something to sell and it's a player-friendly environment, that's where guys want to go.
Now, we're trying to get Luka in the best shape possible. Is from your experience, is there anything a front office, a team, an organization can do to help steer a guy in the right direction of staying in shape, or is that just fantasy land?
No, I think certainly you would love to have him in the Dallas area probably more and not, being overseas and then all of a sudden he shows up in September. I think it's going to be a little bit interesting just because last year you played into late May, I want to say, and then he went right into the international competition. There's probably going to be a little bit of a month or a month and a half lag time here. So I mean, the goal, of course, is to have him here. The challenge becomes as far as when he goes back home. As far as keeping an eye as far as what he's doing here, and you're basically kind of trusting that player. I mean, that's the only thing you really can do, except having somebody basically, stationed out there with him, full time.
It's an insane hypothetical, and it's impossible, and it's never going to happen, Bobby. But would you trade Luka for Wembanyama?
Oh, man, nobody's ever asked me that before. Goodness gracious, that caught me off guard on a late afternoon on Friday. Good thing I didn't have a beer already in me,
That makes one of us.
Oh, man, that's an interesting shoot.
Why the hell not?
Yeah, huh? I don't know. I mean, the only thing I like about, besides a lot with Victor, is it restarts the clock again, right? It restarts, it gets you another 8 years, another 9 years here because you've got him on the rookie and then another extension. And where Luka, you've got 3 or 4 years left here. But man,
maybe a two-way star. Is Wembanyama going to be a force on defense?
I think he's got to have a center around him. I think it's important. If he was on a Memphis team with Steven Adams as his 5, I think, that would Atlanta with Capella or Kongu, one of those guys. If he's going to be your primary guy at the 5, I have a little bit of a challenge here, but I think he's got to go to the right. I mean, shoot, if he goes to Detroit, they already got 5 centers. So, but I think it's a matter of kind of where he goes. But I don't know, defensive presence here. It'll take a little bit of a time, but man, he is, we haven't seen a player like that in a long time.
How well did you know Spencer Dinwiddie from your time with the Nets?
Well, I wasn't there. So, yeah, I mean, Spencer got there. I think he was there about a year later. So I think Spencer, as you know, I don't think he's for everyone, right? I don't think he's for everyone just because he's smart as a whip here, and sometimes that gets him in trouble. Like, I'm watching the Kuzma feud right now, and I'm thinking, golly, geez, just worry about Philadelphia. You know, like, worry about Philadelphia in the first round, except Kyle Kuzma going back and forth here. So he's
and Rick
a good
Fox
player.
apparently now.
Oh, is it? I mean, just worry about trying to get past Embiid and the Sixers. Like that'd be if I was Sean Marks in Brooklyn, that'd be driving me crazy right now.
Well, we certainly enjoyed his game and his personality when he was here. You're right, he is smart as a whip and pretty awesome to see talking a variety of subjects. All righty, thank you so much for your time. Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider, and enjoy the playoffs, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.